Hello everyone, let's talk about faces of death. But before we talk about anything, I will just say that I am completely aware that about 50% of this whole shockumentary is fake. And by all means, this thing can also be found on YouTube. Now, I won't stop you going to find it on YouTube, as it's there, ready to watch, but do be aware that it does contain some very graphic imagery. And this is probably going to be one of the only times that I tell you that you can go and watch something if you fancy, just because, well, it's right here on the platform to watch. But if you don't want to give it a go and you're much too queasy to do so, then welcome to the video, and let's get right into it. Now, all I'll really be doing throughout this is basically summarising the whole thing, basically giving a few opinions on it too. So, just a little bit of background before we begin the review and explanation. Faces of Death is a 1978 Mondo horror movie, it calls itself, and the basis of this whole thing is basically just gruesome ways of dying. A lot of sequences and iconic moments in this mixtape, or rather Mondo Go shockumentary, are faked, while a lot of it is in fact real aftermaths of death or after death. Now, I can't tell you which clips are and aren't faked unless I've seen the clip before, so with that, let's get into it. So we start off with a nice little bit of heart surgery. It's surgery with this really odd sort of obviously stock heartbeat sound over the top of it. There's then a sequence of mummified dead old people in which there's this really annoying buzzing sound over the top of it. It shows somebody performing an autopsy on one of these corpses as the opening credits roll. And this Chad right here is our narrator. This is Michael Carr. He gives us some information which set him off on his journey to go and have a look at the dead, in which he dreamt about a young woman and a priest dying in this dream, which made him go and search the world for death. It's actually pretty morbid to say it was just a dream, and the things I'm about to summarise and show you guys today are basically all of the things he discovered because of this crazy dream that he had. So we hop over to Mexico first, where we witness a natural disaster that's happened. And it's pretty horrible what happened to the people who died during this natural disaster, as families who couldn't afford to keep their dead buried actually had their relatives exhumed because they were too poor to pay for the gravesite that they were buried in, which is pretty morbid too. And it's around this point in the shockumentary that I can't understand a single word that this narrator is saying. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Star Wars before, like the dead original ones back in the 70s, but he sounds like he's talking through a fucking Starship microphone. The sound quality is ridiculously bad. Anyway, we move on to some bullfighting and dogfighting after this. Now, dogfighting is illegal. It's basically where two pit bulls in this scenario go up against each other and fight until the death. These fights can go on for as long as 2 hours, and the owner of a dog can win up to 5,000 Mexican pesos just by winning one fight. And unfortunately, like many animals in this situation, these pit bulls have been conditioned to fight, and unfortunately it's the only thing that they know. We're then taken to the Amazon jungle, and a quick trigger warning: if you don't like spiders, look away for the next few seconds as one's about to appear on your screen. But this big motherfucker here starts eating a full bird. And this segment basically just takes you through how brutal wildlife, especially the Amazon rainforest, really is. In this same forest, we're also taken to a tribe that lives there. We're given a little example of what these people do, and we see one of them blowpiping a monkey. This tribe basically eats everything that they catch in the jungle. They will literally eat anything. And they also make alcohol out of the things that they manage to pull together and yeah, somehow they managed to get pissed on that stuff in the rainforest, so pretty cool place, I'd say. Now moving on from South America, we go to Africa, where we're basically taken to more wildlife and jungles and trees. We're shown another tribe. This time one of them basically slits the throat of a cow using nothing but a bow and arrow to drain the blood from its neck. The blood is collected, and as well as that, they also skin the cow while it's still alive and bleeding. It's quickly followed on by some more livestock. We're shown this lovely lady where she really gives me Jason from Friday the 13th vibes as she walks up to this chicken coop with a knife. A really somber version of Old MacDonald Had a Farm plays over the top of this whole thing. It's like if Chicken Run was a Blue Mouse production. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I, what the fuck? It's just the way she slams that butcher's knife down as well. Jesus Christ. Proceeds to chop the head off of this chicken. So I guess it's a more painless, quick way to go for the chicken. Keeping in line with the way that livestock is slaughtered for food, we also see a large bunch of pigs, cows, chickens, sheep on their way to an inevitable death. Now, one of the methods that we're shown of killing cows is the kosher way, the Jewish way, basically. It basically includes the cow being blessed by a rabbi, in which its throat is cut and it's left to die, choking on its own blood. See, they call it kosher, I call it a way of inhumanely killing an animal for food, but each to their own, I guess. We're then taken to a special restaurant with belly dancers, dancing, shockingly enough, in which there's a group of people waiting at a table. Now, a waiter comes out, this looks like it's in Japan or something by the way, or China maybe. A waiter comes out with a monkey. Now, he places the monkey in a little hole in the table and then secures its neck at either side with two wooden boards, basically trapping the monkey in place. The two men sitting at this table then start hitting the monkey repeatedly on the head with this small mallet-like hammer. As the monkey has passed away, the skull is carved open, specifically for the brain. Apparently this whole exercise apparently makes them feel closer to God or something. It's just a really pointless exercise. And the women at the table are just like absolutely disgusted by what they're eating. And I'm not surprised. It's brain, literal brain. We then dive into the ocean. Unfortunately, again, it's nothing nice. It's basically the art of hunting seals. See these same people basically hunting for shark and seal. We see a group of hunters and we're informed that these people are hired by the government to lower the seal population, basically resulting in them killing them and then skinning them. And the narrator claims that after seeing this he became a vegan or something. I doubt it very much, and it was probably said for the shock factor. We're also shown some poachers. Now, unlike the government-hired seal killers, poachers are actually illegal. We see these poachers trying to kill alligators, as alligators are meant to take a lot of skill to hunt down, which means they're worth quite a lot on the black market. There's also an example of alligator farms, where alligators are raised and then used when they reach adulthood. And there's this little scene that pops up. It looks very staged. It's like Jaws, but if Jaws was 10 times worse, but with alligators. We then have this French dude that gets shot, in which it quickly cuts to an assassin driving this car. We also get an interview with this assassin, but unfortunately they've edited his voice so much that he actually sounds like Princess Leia dressed as this thing. Again, another Star Wars reference, I'm not proud, but here we are. And this gives us the start of a shootout between one man and a police force. They finally smoke this man out of the house in which he's shot dead. Unfortunately, in this house, he's left a dead wife, a dead son, and a dead daughter. Keeping on with death, we now go to the Los Angeles coroner's office, where around 40 cases of death are taken on per day. Once each body's case has been solved, the height, weight and fingerprints of the body are then taken. An example we get is a gang member who has been involved and killed in a deadly shootout. It's all very dramatic and emotional, with piano music over the top, as this young lad's cadaver is placed on the table in preparation for an autopsy. And the narrator starts bursting out this poem over a big compilation of people in various stages of being autopsied, which I don't even know if that's a word. He also mentions that it's sad that many young people lose their lives because of violence, and honestly on this part I couldn't agree with him more, because young people losing their lives to violence is still a very, very common occurrence today, if not more than back in the 70s. Not that I was around then. And to top it off, if a case can't be studied and evidence can't be collected with the human eye, then technology would be brought into play. Also, much like today, using microscopes to have a look at microscopic little things on bodies and whatnot. And while these cases are ongoing, the bodies are stored in refrigerators at around 42 degrees Fahrenheit. This leads us on to criminal punishment, more specifically execution. With this we're shown a high security prison. This is the last stop for every criminal who is put here before they're sentenced to death. There's no way out of this prison. Once you're in this prison, you're in there and you're going to die. Around this time in 1977, 35 states reinstated the death penalty. This is the gas chamber. Within 60 seconds, the prisoner is rendered unconscious, and within a minute, he's rendered dead. Now we see a prisoner partake in this event, in which they're strapped up and locked in. Another prisoner is also put on the well-known electric chair. There's pieces of fabric taped over his eyes, so that his eyes don't pop out while he's being electrocuted. And for some reason there's some really silly kids music playing over the top of this guy being electrocuted to death. It's really silly xylophone music. It's not really music suitable for somebody bleeding from the eye sockets and being electrocuted to death. Yeah, very, very strange choice of music for this part. We then move over to footage filmed apparently by a Canadian tourist touring in the Middle East. This is criminal punishment elsewhere, and a bit less inhumane, as the method of execution is, you probably guessed it, a beheading, using a giant katana. And for some reason the narrator finds it great to move on to cults after this, such as a cult of immortality, the ability to live forever. I'm pretty sure they'll have a shock when somebody in this cult actually dies though. I mean, the dude is a little bit strange and clearly believes that he has a god complex. And it gets a little bit weird. It only gets weirder. They start touching up this body, this group of people start touching this guy's body, I presume he's dead, in which the guy is then cut open. One of his organs is taken out, and they begin to eat it. And apparently it ended with an orgy as well. These people literally got sexually excited by eating a man's organs. They're basically lathering each other in blood and having sex covered in blood. Moving on from the orgy, we go to Kentucky to another cult. Excuse me, I had something in my throat there. This is a god-related cult. It's one of those crazy cults where people believe that the Holy Spirit is inside them and whatnot. It's just a large group of people screaming and making weird noises. We've got an unfortunate incident of a woman who jumps off of a building to commit suicide, and again the music choice is just no, because the song basically goes a 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4, in which after the 4 she basically jumps off of the building. It's horrendously timed. We're also taken to the case of a man named Samuel Berkowitz, in which his body is cryogenically frozen, I think. Now these people are frozen in the hopes that in the future a cure will come out for their disease or whatever they've had, in the hopes that it will basically bring them to life in the future. They're basically stored in a liquid nitrogen capsule at 320 degrees below freezing, so it's cold in there. Very, very cold. Drowning. Now, these are basically people who have succumbed to drowning or done stupid things and drowned in the process. For example, the case of a young man who was very, very drunk and decided to go in the sea and ended up drowning. And this section is basically to do with accidents, as there's also a man who's gone rock climbing in a cave, and unfortunately he's fallen about 90 feet down to his death. And this is confirmed with the narrator telling us that he basically died due to a broken neck. We've got some mountains next, and not like the ones that Shakira owns. We see a bear who seems really docile and chill. He eats a bit of bread and is overall just a really chill guy. And then the bear goes batshit crazy, like he's just snorted a kilo of cocaine. And it shows the bear chowing down on what is apparently the remnants of this man who was teasing the bear with bread in the first place. We also see Mother Nature's rage against the human race, with a few volcanoes and a flooding that happened in Pennsylvania in 1972. This also included a tornado that we see, as well as a giant burning building with people jumping out of it. We're also told about humans fucking themselves over, and by that I mean pollution. There's just shit all over this beach, and it reminds me of Blackpool Beach. If you're in the UK, you might have had a day out at Blackpool Beach, in which you know that the sea is basically made up of 3 things: plastic, Starbucks, and fish and chips. It really just highlights the amount of crap that people throw on the floor, and even to this day, nothing's changed. People still litter. People even fly tip now, which is like 10 times worse, just getting out and tipping everything onto the floor. It's a very common thing here. And this also goes for pollution, which obviously companies claim to be cutting down on now with more fuel efficient things and whatnot. And there's also people protesting against nuclear waste as well, which is fair enough and makes more sense than these people protesting against climate change. And for some reason a guy sets himself on fire for this protest, in which there's a bunch of people around him screaming, and ultimately he's put out with a fire extinguisher. Not sure whether he dies or not. And then there's footage of war and war crimes. A few planes, a few ships, a few ship cannons, and for some reason a pirate ship. A lot of it is footage of World War II, including the giant mushroom cloud that rose up from the atomic bomb during the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And Hitler also makes an appearance, and he was of course a very manipulative man who thought he could take over the world. And I'm pretty sure that most of us know exactly what Hitler did, as we're also shown footage of concentration camps in which unfortunately millions of Jews were killed. We're also shown another kind of killer, except this one is of the vermin kind. It's the rats that caused the Black Plague. And apparently rats have caused more deaths than every single war in human history combined. We're also shown vampire bats who also pass on rabies. There's also the disease cholera, which we see in Africa, which is mostly caused by dirty water. Along with this, we're also shown the really bad starvation problem in Africa as well. Cancer also unfortunately makes an appearance, a horrific and dreadful disease. Now, back in the 1970s, testing out cancerous cures on dogs with cancer was a way of trialling and testing whatever these new cures may have been at the time. And unfortunately, even with modern day technology, cancer is still a completely life-ruining disease. Even with the technology we've got today, it really only can be got rid of if found quickly. It's definitely a disease that human beings still need to learn about even today. So, we've been on land and we've been underwater. We're then taken up into the sky. We're doing some skydiving next. It's a pretty spectacular stunt to do, you know, watching videos of it, except this is Faces of Death, and you can probably guess that the next man to come down with a parachute attached to his back actually fails and just falls 2,000 feet straight onto the ground with no parachute. And on the same line of stunts, there's also a car stuntman who's about to perform a very dangerous stunt for a movie, in which the cable attached to the car basically snaps, leaving him to crash when he goes over this ramp, causing internal bleeding and eventually death. There's also the derailment of a giant train in which several hundred people were killed. And we learn that over 56,000 people in 1978 in the US were killed on highways every single year. One of these ends up being a woman on a bike she's basically crushed by a truck to the point that she's unidentifiable. We're also shown footage of a man who was a little bit drunk and decided to show off his playing skills to his friend. He basically ended up doing a stunt and a couple of dives and a couple of rolls, but unfortunately the right wing of this plane snapped off, which led him and his friends to their death. We also go to a nice warm day in the middle of September where a commercial plane crashed into a light cargo plane. Now, both of these planes came right down in the middle of a neighbourhood, in which it caused a bit of a devastating effect right in the middle of this neighbourhood. And there's just bits and pieces of these people from these two planes just knocking about in various places in this neighbourhood, which leads us on to one of our final things, which is ghosts and spirits. Basically the afterlife. Now, I'm not a big believer of ghosts and spirits. I've never seen a ghost, and I've never seen a spirit. It's a little bit like aliens, you know. Gotta see it to believe it. And in conclusion to this, the end game, the narrator believes that our souls, when we die, are basically trapped. And honestly, it just feels like the whole point of this shockumentary was for this narrator to say, yeah, you know what, when we die we become spirits, that's it, fuck off. Shockumentary's over. It just seemed somewhat pointless. It basically started erupting into this huge gigantic dream that the dude had, only for him to say, yeah, you know what, ghosts and spirits, that's all we are, and that's basically it. We're living in Ghostbusters. And just to finish it off, on the opposite side of death, we basically have a woman pushing a baby out of herself while doing some really bad acting. The baby cries, and the credits roll. And that's really about it. There's not really any true conclusion to it. He never really gave us the whole, you know, big idea towards what he was trying to find out with this documentary. It's like he got up one day and just said, you know what, I'm gonna go find death. And the only thing that he came up with was some kind of unexplained thing that people can't even explain or give evidence for today, which is of course ghosts and spirits. Now, I think the thing overall, there was a lot to it. It was a lot to follow. I think the clips went just way too quick. Like, it was like, okay, well, this is this, then this is this, then this is this, and that's basically the whole thing. just made it extremely difficult to follow or even write notes on, because literally everything that I talked about in this shockumentary, that's basically it. Like, I barely cut any corners in this thing. It was all just one clip to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And don't get me wrong, I learned a lot from it, and there definitely would be some valuable information within this shockumentary if it wasn't made in 1978. But I do know that some people are a big fan of this particular shockumentary, so I'm not really gonna shit all over it. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great, it was very quick. I'm not sure if there's a second one. There might be a second one. We might cover the second one if there is. Let's see, well apparently there's another 5, so that's fun. Except the 6th one's more of like a compilation of the highlights. I'm reading here, it's basically a compilation of the earlier films, so I guess there's 4 more after this. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.
And that your life is like a puzzle, and the pieces one by one fall into place. To the when you look back on your days and all the miracles of life flow through your